But that's the point. In the States, you can sort of tailor a jury to a certain extent, but it involves both sides. So, could that be fairer? Here, you might get 15 potential members of a jury. They'll ask a few questions, and somebody can't sit for more than 3 weeks. If it's like a 2-month fraud trial, someone's like, I can't do that. I have to,
Yeah, and most be jury, they don't even know what's going on.
Or what if you knew the defendant, or a prosecutor that they can read out names, and you might know one of the people in the case. So in those circumstances you can't be on the jury either. But it's much more limited here than it is in the States.
I was going to say, when we talked about fairness, do you believe IPP was fair?
Oh my goodness! Don't even get me. Have you got 3 hours?
Yeah. but before, tell to the people with the camera what IPP is.
So IPP was brought in the Criminal Justice Act 2003. Actually came into force in April 2005, and it was designed. It was effectively the brainchild of David Blunkett, the MP responsible for it at the time, and he decided that it would be a really good idea for people who are convicted of relatively serious offences to have to prove that they were no longer dangerous before they could be released.
Sorry, it was serious.
That's all right. Yeah. Siri doesn't like IPP either. Just want to put that on record. Siri thinks it's unjust. So what that meant was, they thought that about 100 people a year was going to get this type of sentence, and it turned out about 1,000 people a year got it.
Oh, wow.
So what that meant was that when you go into prison, you got an IPP. What you had to do was go on courses and show that you were no longer dangerous by addressing the elements of your risk that made you dangerous to the public. Now, you could get it for all sorts of different offences. I think it was 153 different offences, a whole bunch of them. But, of course, then the system got clogged up. And judges didn't have any discretion because they had to in certain... So it was like the old two strikes life. Yeah, it was like that. But judges didn't have any discretion as to whether or not to give IPP or not. And there was no minimum amount of time. So the shortest IPP sentence was 28 days. 28 days. So that meant within 28 days, that person's tariff had expired and they had to go in front of the parole board. Now, that's insane. That's completely insane. How could,
So from a 28-day sentence, you could end up being on indefinite...
15, 20 years indefinitely.
That's mad.
Who knows? Because the way that it was put on the system was that somebody would get they were told they had 99 years. I'm sure you've probably met people who were told, I'm in jail for 99 years. It doesn't actually mean that. It's just that the system records it as indeterminate. Yeah. So what that meant was you had to then identify what your areas of risk were with your inside probation officer, and then get on these courses so that the parole board could basically decide that you should be released or not, or sent to open conditions. And in 2008, they kind of realised that it was not a great idea not to give any judges any discretion. So they widened the discretion. But there was still loads and loads of people getting IPP.
So wait, so I understand, so to bring it back, so you say the judge had no discretion. So who was given the IPP, sorry?
So basically Parliament brought a statute in the Criminal Justice Act 2003 that basically said you have to give people an IPP in these circumstances.
Oh, yeah. And what were those circumstances? Obviously, I know
so effectively that they were convicted of certain offences more than once, or that they were convicted of a certain specified offence, and very limited discretion. So there's no case is the same. Everybody has a different backstory, and so many people that are in jail, and I've represented a lot of people in jail, a lot of people have significant trauma in their lives that lead them to the point at which they're offending. So a judge needs to know that, right, to understand the person, how they got to the point at which they're in